Okay, so Solomon's going to do a presentation for about an hour or so, maybe less, depending on questions and topics about award entry. And then I'm going to take over and give you an update on the committee's e-form, the e-form that's going to replace qualifying exam application, advancement to candidacy, recon, all that fun stuff. The thing everyone's been waiting for, right? Okay, take it away, Solomon.
So what I'm going to talk about primarily today is not so much the system side, which I went on about for way too long last time, but actually more business processes and getting ready for entering all of our 17-18 awards in time for the upcoming start of the fall term and payment. So I'm going to talk a little bit about timeline and the processes for entering awards, and then some business process changes that we're making in conjunction with MIA to hopefully make this coming year awarding go better than last year's. So the first item is that awarding can start now. In award entry, this would mean that you're entering awards for aid year 2018. So that means when you're ready to be doing only 2018 awards, you're going to want to change your user defaults in the setup SACR tab to make 2018 your default, so that when you're entering your fall awards, you're not accidentally entering fall 17 awards. Presumably the disbursement IDs would give you a clue about that, but once you're ready to start, which is probably pretty much now since we're done with 2017, go ahead and change your default aid year to 2018. You do not, this is the item type issue is primarily for is almost exclusively for departmental awards. You don't need to create new item types for the 2018 year, thank God. They just get copied over. FASO is working on this right now, and there are a few stragglers, some of the item types that were created very late in the late spring and summer. Primarily, we're thinking summer item types that still need to be copied, but those should be done in the next couple of days. So this wouldn't be an issue. And if for some reason you can't find in 2018 an item type that you created in 2017, you can send an email to award entry, which is something I'm going to talk about in the next part of the presentation. The tuition and fee, yeah, Kate.
Does this mean summer will be available?
I'm going to get to that in the next slide, actually, yeah. The tuition and fees are, I guess, being finalized by the regents in a meeting going on right now. So the registrar has said that we'll be posting the 17-18 fee figures the end of this week. So watch for them very soon on the registrar's website. That's obviously necessary for you to be able to set up your fee awards with the correct amounts. As you know, last year we didn't disperse any awards until, I think it was August 15th. Yeah, way too late. This year, we've made arrangements with FASO, and award entry awards are going to start dispersing on August 1st. Not as early as in the past. However, they're not assessing fees as early as they did in the past. In fact, I don't think the fee assessment date has been worked out yet, but what I've heard is it's going to be late this month. That's I can't speak for the registrar or SIS on that, but basically it's going to be late in July, and therefore an August 1 disbursement date on the fees is fairly timely. And the standard date for payment of fall stipends will be August 14th. That's the equivalent of the August 15th date when we started dispersing last year. So that would be the disbursement plan AY, the standard disbursement plan used in award entry. Okay, so to answer Kate's question, we've decided that there will be no awarding of summer 2018 yet. We would very much like to open this up earlier than we did last year, but there are some issues in the financial aid part of CS that need to be worked out, and we don't feel confident in opening it up yet. So hopefully it won't be like it was this year in, April or May, very late. But hold off on your summer awards for now, because we want to make sure they actually load properly when you enter them. Because of that, we've actually hidden all the summer disbursement plans, so you can't actually make a summer award, unlike last year where you weren't supposed to, but you totally could. And then they sat there in error state all year. Yeah. Okay, on departmentally restricted awards, unfortunately, there's still no income information in CS. So that means we're going to be extending GLOW for another year as the source of information on your carry forward and estimated, and then eventually actual income on your departmentally restricted awards. So obviously, since students who entered in fall 16 and the new students this year, since they're not in GLOW, none of the expenses themselves are in GLOW on your DRs, right? Those are only on reports coming out of CS. However, we took all the expenses that grad div in general, and including on your DRs, made in 16, 17, summed them all up and put the totals in GLOW so that your carry forwards will be correct. Carry forwards going into 17, 18, what your balance was at the end of the 16, 17 year. So we've finished the first part of that upload. It's not visible yet, but will be very shortly. And the business office is working on the estimated income. I can't provide a date on that, but it should be very soon. So to summarize, when you go into GLOW, just like last year where you saw year 16, 17, and you saw your carry forward from 15, 16, and then your estimated income for the year, it'll be the same, except for that the carry forward for 17, 18 will have reflected all of the 16, 17 expenses. Hope that makes sense. Last item on this slide is that we still haven't sent out the continuing multi-year reports for your continuing multi-year fellows. Those will be going out next week in order to get them set up in time for the start of the fall. Okay, one thing that Mia and fellowships noticed, it was pretty much obvious to all of us in this past year, was a lot of confusion about where you as GSAOs were supposed to go with problems and issues with awards and with billing statements, right? So there was the SIS help email and the tickets through ServiceNow, directly to me in some cases, to your fellowships contact. Cal Student Central, although for graduate students, that's not usually where you refer them. So given all that confusion, we wanted to clarify everything for this year and to create a simple model, hopefully simple, that you can use for deciding where to send any inquiry regarding an award problem or a billing problem for one of your students. So the idea is that there are just two principal points of contact. That would be your departmentally assigned contact in fellowships, so Gina, Michael, Rita, per your department, and this new email address, principally manned by Mia, which is award entry at berkeley.edu. So for GSAOs, which is everyone in the room, I think, the division on where you're going to send a particular inquiry is going to be based on whether the student has accepted loans. So if the student has no accepted loans, then you're going to send your inquiry to your fellowships contact, to Gina, Michael, or Rita. And that means even about department awards. So what would have been paid through DSAS, those awards, FASO is partnering with us to make sure we have the tools necessary to resolve those issues too. So if the student doesn't have loans, which is probably the majority of the PhD only or principally PhD programs, your contact is going to be Gina, Michael, or Rita in the fellowships office. If the student does have accepted awards for professional programs, et cetera, then send your inquiry to award entry at berkeley.edu. So this is a new model since we're not used to thinking about loans as the dividing line, but we'll be working with Mia to make sure that all of the issues are passed back and forth behind the scenes appropriately to resolve any issues. But this way there's less confusion about who's going to be responding to you and where you should actually be sending your inquiries. Yeah, Rosia.
If a student has converted loans into work study and there's an issue, who do we contact?
That'd be award entry at Berkeley, yeah.
How do we know a student has a loan?
One key thing here is accepted loan.
Don't forget to repeat the question.
Oh, sorry. The first question was if the student had converted loans to work study, where do they go? And the answer was award entry at Berkeley.edu. And Veronica's question was, how do they know if they have accepted loans? So in the view term award summary, if you click on the little grid in award entry next to the student, you'll see their entire award package. That's something I spent a lot of time on last time as being the most definitive summary of the student's award package for the year that's available to award entry users. You'll see the descriptions will be loans. So the key here is accepted, though, because there's a lot of students for various reasons who fill out a FAFSA but have no intention of taking out loans, obviously not international students, but others who are fully funded. There may be an award offer on the package for those students. Those inquiries for that group of students can still come to fellowships. We're only talking about students who are actually taking out loans. So that's primarily professional students and then some others as well.
Where do you find that?
The View Term Award Summary is the name of it. So if you're in award entry and in the student grid in the middle, right, it's award, student, disbursements. Next to the student's name, there's this little grid icon. If you click on that, it's going to show you every single award the student has for this year. And you'll see in the item type description, unsubsidized federal loan, federal plus loan, things like that. Yeah, read it. That's true, yes. It's also if you do a view as student in Cal Central, and the description of loans are obvious there too, unlike, say, the fee remissions. So here is a summary of the plan a little more extensively, but in yellow is what, since your GSAO is what you primarily care about, but I just thought would put out the entire plan in case you get questions from your partners at CSS or other award entry users who aren't in the room. But the idea is that if the student only has award entry, no loans, goes to fellowships. If they have award entry and loans, goes to award entry. But if for non-GSAOs, for CSS and other research institutes, all of those inquiries are going to go to award entry. And also if the student has no award entry awards at all, that would be someone who's paying out of pocket or is only receiving loans, then Cal Student Central is the appropriate contact. Okay, I mentioned at the beginning that we want to talk about business process changes. That's driven by the fact that since the system that we have is, to put it delicately, imperfect, we've decided to use some changes in the way that we offer some changes in the way that we process awards to try to work around that and reduce the number of errors that we've seen in this past year. So what we've decided is that the fellowship staff, Gina, Michael, and Rita, your principal contacts, will be willing to serve as approvers for your department awards. This is part of the transition, part of the movement of some of the work that was previously department awards to fellowships and the other way around when it comes to loans. But I want to make clear that this is totally optional. So if for your department awards, your former DSAS awards, you have a great arrangement of entering and approving and everything is going smoothly, then everything will just stay the same. So we'll be sending out an email from me that it provides instructions on if you want to have Gina, Michael, or Rita serve as your approver, how to opt in. And I want to just mention that this is only for GSAO's department's academic programs. We're not going to be doing this for CSS or faculty awards and others, yeah. Only for you guys. So in my mind, there are 4 benefits to having fellowships as your approver for these. Number one, as I said, if you have if your current approver or approvers are people with a student funding background, then obviously that's probably working great. But in some cases with small departments, the approver may be someone who's in the finance realm and may not know a lot about student awarding. So in this case, if you have Gina, Michael, or Rita serve as your approver, you'll be having your awards approved by someone who's actually very experienced in the student. Two, they'll be looking at the award that you're entering within the context of the entire package. That's getting to the view term award summary, but more importantly, thinking about how that award, or perhaps noticing how that award is going to interact with other awards on the student's package in a way that some other approver may not. Third, if your block grants and your DRs are already being entered in coordination with your contact in our office, it may make sense to actually have your department awards, say departmental endowments or other related training grants that you may be handling at the departmental level, entered at the same time as your block grants and DRs, especially if the two different types of awards are actually being awarded in concert. So can be more coordination of your awards there. And fourth, as I mentioned in the previous section, since your principal contact, if you're a PhD program, is going to be your contact in fellowships, then it may make sense to have your approver and your troubleshooter for award and billing issues problems be the same person. However, here are the caveats. Fellowships obviously knows nothing about your funds and the terms of those funds and whether an award is being made appropriately per the fund terms. So that means you have to be comfortable doing any kind of accounting checks for the appropriate usage of the funds on the ledger side by your financial budget accounting team. So if that's not your practice and you're used to a front-end check and that's important to the checks and balances in your unit, then that might be a problem. And it's definitely the case that you, as the enterer for department awards, are still completely responsible for ensuring that the fund terms are being followed. This isn't substantially different from, say, with DRs, where we also provide the fund terms to you, and when you enter an award, you're certifying that the award is made in a manner consistent with the terms of the fund. But I just want to be clear that if you set up someone in fellowships as your awarder, it doesn't mean that we're checking the fund terms for you. Yes?
Would we be able to add the fellowships person and keep the person in our department?
Yes.
We could have both options.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That actually makes sense. Sorry, the question was whether you could keep your existing approvers and also add someone from the fellowships unit to serve as an approver. The answer is yes, and that may make sense if, for example, you're only worried about making a swap between two different types of awards and you want it to go in concert, to happen at the same time, and you want someone in fellowships to coordinate it, but otherwise are happy with your existing arrangements. That would make sense. Okay, this slide I'm going to go through very quickly because the news here is not good. So last year, at this time or a little bit later, I believe I said we were going to have reports available to you from your fellowships contact on an interim basis until CS was ready. CS is not ready. There is no mechanism yet to have your block grant and DR reports directly out of CS. So we're going to continue with the practice that we had for last year, but I want to clarify what we're going to be doing in terms of the distribution process. And by the process for last year, I mean that only staff in fellowships have access to your block grant and DR expense reports. You obviously will have your DR income shortly in GLOW, but the expenses, the aid year 2018, the 17-18 expenses in CS will be on reports only available from your fellowships contact. So our plan is to distribute them on a monthly basis. We're still finalizing this, but they will probably be through a file transfer like to Box. But putting them, basically moving all of the reports once a month at the end of the month starting in August. I heard from some people that they felt a little bit bashful about asking for more reports. So hopefully the fact that they're just there and you don't need to ask anyone for them on a monthly basis will alleviate that a bit. But I still want to say don't be bashful about asking for them. So Gina, Michael, and Rita can pull reports for you on an off schedule if you want them and put them together for you. So this would include the block grant report, DR report that basically lists expenses for all of your different DR funds, including GFMP and their matches. And then there's another report, I don't know how much it was used this past year, but it is quite good, which is the current year funding report showing every single award for students in your department, not just grad div and department awards, but fee remissions, waivers, third-party contracts, and other things. So it's really helpful in getting a comprehensive view of the funding for your students, and it's actually even better than what you had in GLOW, since there it was only grad div awards and excluded DSAS.
When I
Yeah.
ask you, the block grant that we were receiving, I'm wondering with this year, will that include the balance in that report?
It's a manual process, but yes. Yeah, we will add it, yeah. It's not gonna look as good as, because it's still in Excel, but yeah, we have the previous, we have your allocations, and we can, yeah. Suzanne, yeah.
How did we get that last
Oh.
report you mentioned? The one with all the TPC and remissions and things like that?
Yeah, well, it'll, sorry, okay, so sorry, I'm forgetting to repeat the questions, but one question was whether the block grant report would have balances. The answer there is yes. Suzanne's question is about how you get the current year funding report. It will be available at the same time. And it's a canned report in CS. Actually involves less manual manipulation on our part, so it's easier to provide. But it's kind of daunting because it includes loan offers, and it's actually, I think, only awards, so it wouldn't include those students who fell out FAFSA with no intention of taking out loans. But there's a lot on that report, so it's really helpful, but it requires some filtering. Yeah, Sharina.
Does it include item types for the awards that we'll put in?
The question was whether the report includes item types. The answer is no. Yeah, it only includes the name of the award. So yeah, so that actually brings up, yeah, an issue that that's not really helpful on department and departmental awards. I mean, you know how much a student would be receiving, but what charge string it was, yeah, charged to is not there. Yeah, I'll make a note to think about that. It's complicated because we don't want to provide item types for all kinds of awards that are not ours, right? But that is something to think about. Kate, yeah.
Slightly off topic,
Yeah.
but tuition's increasing, so will we see a change in our block grant allocation?
I'm looking, the question was whether there would be a change in block grant. The answer there, I'm pretty good, is no. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, there's another question? Yeah.
I'm sorry, this was related to her question, but
Yeah.
not the same.
Yeah.
Do we know what the new fees are? Does anybody know when we will know?
Yeah, it should be the end of this week. There's one fee that needs to be finalized, I think. That's what I've been told by the registrar, but they should be available very soon. Yeah, like we knew about the small tuition increase that the regents approved and had an idea for SHIP, but there's like one part of the campus fee or something that hadn't been finalized. And since adjusting fees is very much a manual process in award entry, we kind of want to get the fee levels right the first time we enter awards for our students, right? Sure. Okay, the last item I wanted to touch on are some small improvements that are going to be made to award entry. There's a list of somewhere between 15 and 20 changes. Many of these were the ones that were included in the survey that was sent out after the last meeting. And a lot of those really small ones are going to be done, but I just wanted to pull out 3 of the ones that Mia and I are more excited about. So one is, we know that the biggest problem this past year was in award modifications and accidentally reducing an award when you intended to increase it, right? That's still a problem. Like if you're having review by you're having your awards approved by someone in the fellowships office, we hope that that extra level of review may help to reduce it on just a business process standpoint. But we're also hoping that technically we can help to reduce it by flagging any disbursement in the disbursement grids as needing a revision. Like basically it's going to show you on the disbursements grid, whether you have the student and the item type, whether the student already has an award on that item type. So signal to you, you need to take into consideration the old award in hopes that that will cause you to encourage you to look at the view term award summary and make sure that you're entering the new award reflecting both the new one and the old one. So we would hope for a more extensive design to the modification process. This is something we talked about last time, but this there's quite a lot of bang for the buck here in terms of this was a small change that could be made and that we could get through. So we're hoping that is at least something. Secondly, on the awards grid at the top where you're selecting your item types or where the item types have been selected, we're going to add fund information. Currently, all you see is the item type number and like the department award or the name of the unit, which is not helpful when they're all the same except for the item type number. So fund information will be there so that you actually know which fund when you have multiple item types in a batch, which fund each award is being charged to. And small. Yeah. And the third one, I talked about this last time, we have way too many charge priorities, right? So we're going to reduce the number. We're not actually reducing the number that are out there, but we're reducing the number that you can see and use, which is the important thing. So this list of 20 will no longer be 20. The number we're working with now is more like 7 or 8, I think, that are actually used in a word entry, but hopefully that will eliminate all of the confusion about which of these seemingly identical charge priorities are the ones that you're supposed to use. And we're requesting modifications to the descriptions too to make them clearer. Yes,
so
Suzanne.
We're going to start entering right away, and some of these are going away. Can we get a heads up about which ones will remain?
Yeah, the question was, what if I enter a word with an item type or with using a charge priority that is going away? So we have queried for all of the charge priorities that have been used in existing item types and are only really removing the ones that shouldn't have been, where there were very few item types ever created, and probably they were created on accident. But yeah. So the ones that are important will not be going away. That's why we're removing the others. If you have an issue, definitely feel free to send an email to a word entry at Berkeley. Obviously, on the grad div side, this is not an issue because we are very careful about which item types are available. But basically, the F all N, which is the existing pay everything, will continue. There's no reason to have the Title IV one, which relates to loans and is not actually used and shouldn't be used. The loan ones will definitely go away. I don't think anyone would ever create an item type, hopefully not, with using a loan charge priority. So that's 3 of them. We're going to you will not see the charge priority that will only pay tax withholding, because I don't know if anyone would really want to only pay that. But to answer Suzanne's question directly, TUI MAN will remain the principal DSAS fee payment charge priority, the one that pays basically everything. GradDiv will continue to use XNP, the one that does not pay PDSTs. And the correct NRST charge priority is FNRSUP, so that F non-res one will go away. And the other ones are used more rarely. Like I believe the FSSRV is used for undergraduate fee remissions or something, so that one will have to stay for those people who use it. But the plan is to change the description so that's clear. Yeah. Mark.
Do you know when that change will happen?
Yeah, so it's part of the next SIS Go Live, which is 9.3, scheduled for mid-August. So it's not exactly ideal since most of the followers will be entered by this time. Sorry about that. But that's the only time that we can get it in. And an announcement will go out about the changes when they go live and you start to see them. Hopefully that will also mean that they will be in place by the time you're doing revisions, obviously. Yeah. So.
Will the taxes be fixed, when the student finally get the tax reduced, or they have to pay back the money without ever.
Okay, so yeah,
You know what I mean, right?
I totally know what you mean. Yeah. Yeah. So in this past year, we went through a series of I forget the count. It was so many that I lost track. It's somewhere around 8 or 9 different tax withholding glitches. Now, it didn't look like this to our international students or to any of you, but apparently all of those problems were actually all caused by distinct issues, and and that were resolved by the billing and payments team with SIS one by one. They're confident that they've resolved all of the issues since they've gone through one cycle of them. I'll be asking the SIS team and, well, billing and payments and SIS to be involved in the testing before the first refund run goes for fall, especially since this is a really big deal. They've been more inclusive of GradDiv's voice on tax withholding since it's our students primarily who are the ones affected by this. So I'm optimistic that, yeah, the problems have been fixed.
I was just going to ask, in the interim between now and the 15th or mid-August, could your office send out an email to the GSAO list with the 7 or 8, just to kind of?
Yeah, the question was, can we release the 7 or 8? The answer is yes. We actually met with SIS yesterday to finalize the process. Mia and I are actually by the end of the week, we'll have finalized the list. So the answer is yes, yeah. So before, I don't know if there are any more questions, but I just wanted to lastly say that me and I have not given up hope on actually making more substantial improvements to the system, and there are still proposals to SIS or to the successor organization to make some additional changes to make the system more usable, but hopefully this will be a bit of a down payment on the improvements that are needed. Yeah.
Just another thing that might be helpful are some more job aids that are more clear on revising awards.
Yes.
I think there's still only the one that's about copying.
Yeah. Kate's point was that the job aid on revisions could use some work, and we agree with that, and we'll work on it. Yeah. Rocio.
I'm just curious to know, is anybody working on finding a solution for like faculty awards, award entry? I guess the example I can give is that I'm often asked to enter awards for students that are not my own because I have access and permission to, because the funding of the faculty award is in my CSS team, right? But I have no overview over the student. I have no idea about why they're being funded in such a way. But I'm being asked to do this because there's nobody else who could do it.
Yeah.
So that's not necessarily a good reason
Right.
for me to do it or to absorb that additional work. So I'm wondering if are the permissions and access and roles being worked on, or do you know of this issue?
Yeah. So the question was about security access for entering awards and the division between the CSS teams and academic departments. It is that the security issue is something that's come up, and we are going to be working on it. So that's actually good input. I personally haven't heard of that being a big issue, because I thought that CSS teams generally have lots of enters approvers, but it sounds like that's not always the case. So we can take that offline and address the the specifics of that case. But in general, yes, we've always wanted a redesign of the security component. That part, there were a lot of challenges in putting together the DSAS version of security with the GLOW version. And yeah, so that was, as you know, award entry was put together in a hurry, and we did the best we could to merge those two different security systems. But we've been having discussions with our SIS colleagues about revamping security, and it's definitely something being worked on. Yeah.
At SPH3 last year, before the big launch, we ended up streamlining the whole process. So I became the official approver and process it for the whole school. And so what we ended up doing was, before any submission ever got to me, I had to go through either the RAs to check the funds, or even go through the finance team to make sure that the funds were available within the account before it was even processed. So that could be a scary way, just make sure that the RA or the finance team that the PI is associated with actually confirms that there are funds there so that you don't experience any deficits.
Yeah. So I think Michael? Yeah. So Michael's point was that units can use creative business processes to try to establish internal checks and balances to make sure that funds are being spent as they should be and awards are set up correctly. So I would point out that even if you want Gina, Michael, Rita, your department contact in fellowships to be the approver for your awards, it's totally possible for the enterer to enter the awards, have someone else in the department review them before it gets routed for final approval in the graduate division. And obviously, you could do the same thing with block grant. Ideally, there would be a system that allowed for, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 checks before an award posts. Well, then then people may never get paid. But as you can see, we're trying to be creative about changing business processes in order to work around the limitations of the system until we can get it working the way that we want it to. Yeah.
Yes. Is there a way for the team that is approving the item type to check if there's money in the account before approving? The reason why I'm asking is I had an experience a couple of days ago where I've been provided a couple of chat streams, and I created the item type and then process the payment of the fee, and turned that there's no money in those 2 first accounts. So I ended up making 3 changes in the process. So if there's a way to flag item type that don't have money in the account, that would
Yeah. So Yawa's question was whether we could make CS check for the fund income or availability of funds in BFS before allowing awards to go through. So as you can probably guess by the fact that there are no balance reports, there is no connection between CS and BFS on that reporting income expense side. That would be ideal but difficult. Even if I think it would be helpful just to at least have a report available. Whether we can actually implement a hard check in CS would be difficult, but ideally if there were a report available that you could actually run that was like what our goal is, obviously for DRs, but also available for department funds that would show the current balance. You could at least reference that report before entering an awards. So that I can tell you that's not going to be available anytime in the future, but it is something that Graduate Division is exploring since and that we want to consider. Seeing as we're going into the second year without reports the way we're used to them, we're trying to think through all the different options for various ways we can make the report, that type of data available to you. And to us too, because we're users of those reports as well. Suzanne.
On the department awards side, many of our awards got stuck due to federal over-award flags being placed on them.
Yeah.
There was discussion of taking that feature off for all graduate students, and I'm wondering if that's going to go forward for this year.
So the question is about the federal over-award hold that was impacting department awards, where the student was receiving more funding than the cost of attendance in their budget, even if they were an international student and Title IV rules never applied. So I don't know where we stand on that, but the answer is yes, there is a plan in place to replace that process with another one that's more finely targeted toward hitting the actual group of students whose awards do need to be held, because it is beneficial in the case of students on loans and desirable, I think, by everyone to make sure their package is readjusted rather than giving them money and immediately asking them to pay back other money, which is pay back the loans, which is what that hold was designed to prevent. But yes, FASO is working on a replacement for that mechanism. I would also say that until it's in place, and even if it doesn't work, part of the reason that we are trying to shift the distribution of work between Mia's office and ours is to try to allow FASO to concentrate on that particular group, the loan recipients, and make sure that they get a timely resolution of their issues and not get bogged down in what are from their point of view standard, but what are for us daily life, graduate funding packages that don't involve loans. And part of the reason we want to shift some of that work for the no loan PhD students toward graduate division is so that we can use tools that FASO has given us to resolve that in a more timely manner by working together as a team of 4 to get those resolved more quickly. So the answer is yes, there is hopefully it will never happen again, but even if this turns out to be technically more difficult, we are just going to use human power to get them through faster so that even if that hold is in place, it will only last for like a day or not at all. That's the goal.
Okay, so is there anything proactive we ought to do on this, or should we anticipate that it won't be a big problem this year and we don't need to be proactively looking to make sure that they're all loose?
So Suzanne's question is, I think if I understood it, should we be writing to someone every time we have a student who has a potential over-award hold? The answer is no, you don't need to do that. So the plan we have is to identify anyone who does have the hold in reports that are available more widely within the graduate funding the community of graduate funding processors, so that students won't know that they ever had that hold and that it's removed immediately. Kate.
In the dynamic report, one of the items used to be that we could see what fees hadn't been paid yet for students, and that was something I used quite extensively, but I don't believe that's part of the new report, so I'm just wondering if there's any chance we'll get that, because I can't identify problems in advance anymore. I often have students coming to me when I would have caught fees not going through for some reason and figured out what it was. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Their fees show up in Central, so there must be a field that could be added to a report.
Yeah.
For us.
So Kate's question, I think, was about the report that would show whether students were registered or not, and one of the constituent components of that was whether their fees had been paid. So you had a report to identify what the remaining balance were. Yeah.
If they're a GSI or not, really,
Yeah.
I can look at it and know exactly what's happening by the number that's in there.
Yeah.
I don't want to just know have their fees been paid or not.
Yeah. I have to confess, I don't know if anyone else can help me out, but I'm kind of ignorant of about that, and we're going to have to look into it to see. I don't know. I'm not completely optimistic, but let me look into it and see what we can do. Anything else before I turn it over to Jarrett? Great.
right, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Jarrett Lamont, and I'm the director of the Graduate Degrees Office. And I'm normally a little bit nervous talking like this, but this morning I was intercepted and interviewed by Cron 4 News on my way into. So look for that on the nightly news. I'm sure they'll use it. And that's practically the New York Times. So I'm
Was it well trained?
actually don't know. At least I think it was Cron 4 News. So I'm going to jump right. I'm going to cut to the chase, as they say, and tell you that we are gathered here today because on Monday, this link is going to be shown to students in Cal Central. So on Monday morning, we're going to take collectively a huge leap forward as far as graduate division and my units type of things, degree progress. So back in April, I gave a demonstration over at Barrows of this, I'm calling it the committees e-form, higher degree committees form. So hopefully most of you are at least aware of this form. It's been in development for over a year, and so it's ready to be turned on. It was ready to be turned on in April, and I heard feedback from most people at that meeting that the very end of the spring semester was not a great time to be launching new functionality. And that message was received, so we sort of put it on the back burner, which gave us an opportunity to really look at the rollout of this form and to get some ducks in order. So right now, I'm not going to go through the entire form again. I will show it to you just as a review, but actually what I'd like to discuss mostly is our plan for rolling out this form on Monday and the different resources that are available and things like that. So this is a card in Cal Central, and this is where the students currently apply for filing fee and in absentia, apply for withdrawal, things like that, sort of where all of the e-form links are. And we're going to be turning on this link, which is a link to an e-form that will allow them to advance to candidacy, apply for the qualifying exam, or change their higher degree committee. And sorry, this link here, below it, is how to use the higher degree committees form. And that's going to link to our website. The SIS portion of our website hasn't been added in here yet, but this is live now that has job aids for the different forms that are in production. We'll be adding the job aids for the 3 different versions of this committees form, as well as links to tutorial videos that I recorded. Again, I'm just getting really famous on this campus. Tutorial videos that actually walk through the form for students. And let me see if I can get into the form itself here. Looks like. So, normally I have to start by saying this is in one of our test environments, so it seems particularly slow. Because it's one of the test environments, they don't put all of the resources into that particular server for students. And let me see, hopefully they didn't just take it down. That would be really bad luck. Barb, any idea if they're, like I was on it 2 seconds ago, so that would be bad timing. Okay, well, you know how it is with this system, right? You always have to log in like 4 times. So, try a different browser. Okay, so, throws a bit of a monkey wrench. Well, maybe we'll come back to that in a minute and see if it's working. I do have, I have a plan B, which is just some screenshots of the form. And so You'll remember this is the top section of the form. It looks almost identical to most of the other forms that you're familiar with. It has the student information. Of course, this is being displayed to the student, but then it would also be displayed to you when you review the form, right? And it has the students' academic plans that they are involved in. Let's see. This is kind of the meat and potatoes of the form. And so qualifying exam applications, advancement to candidacy for doctoral or master's, Plan 1 master's, or change of degree committee, the recon forms. Really the main point of the form is just to communicate to the department first and then to the graduate division the committee that's being proposed, right? So that's what this section does, right? And the student will click on the magnifying glass, which brings up a search window. I think I have it here somewhere, maybe not. Brings up a search window that allows the student to find people in the database. And when I say find people in the database, I mean find actual faculty members and actual people so that the form is linking the person on the campus and their employee record to the committee itself. So I think this is the major advance that we're taking here, is that in the past on the paper form, students or departments, whoever's filling out the form, can write in whoever they want. They can use whatever spelling they want. They can use any particular person. It can be very hard for the department, for my staff, to match up who is being written in here. I mean, handwriting is an issue, right? So this is sort of taking away that, and it's saying you actually have to pick the person. And what that's doing is that's allowing then the system to validate all of the various committee rules that are in place. And so anybody who's new as a GSAO that works with Dr. the rules about dissertation committees. Well, you have to have more than 50% from the department. The chair has to be from the department, have to be Senate members. They could not be Senate members, but then they have to do an exception. There's an ASR, used to be called the outside member. You know, there's a lot of these things that are in there. And instead of having to figure all of that out after the form has been submitted, after it's been reviewed, and then sending it back, which induces delays, it can be done right at the time of submission. So when the student fills out their committee, they can click on Submit, and it will try to submit the form, and it will check any number of these policies. And if there's an issue, like let's say they don't have enough people from their department on their committee, it'll pop up a message saying, you do not have enough people from your department on your committee, which will then allow the student to go back, make changes to that grid, add or remove committee members, and then resubmit. And so it could be more than one issue, right? Sometimes it might just be that they need to swap roles. Oh, this person needs to be, you know, the outside member, this person needs to be the inside member, things like that. If everything is good to go, when they hit submit, it will just submit the form immediately to the GSAO to review and approve. This section here is used for if, number one, there's something wrong with those checks. Maybe somebody really is a member of the department, but for one reason or another, the system doesn't recognize that person as a member of the department, or it's an exceptional committee, or there's just something else going on. Essentially, you know, students saying yes to this request and exception forces the form through. So this is sort of like the fail-safe, that if everything is not working right, or the student really can't get it to submit, and they say yes, request an exception, it'll go through sort of bypassing those checks. And then when you review the form, you would see at the bottom all of the different issues that the system found that that were bypassed, basically. No questions yet? I'm going to try to just get through this. There's one issue of what if a student wants somebody on their committee who is not pickable, right? That doesn't exist in the database. If that happens, for now, contact graduate division, contact my staff, contact me. And we can essentially add the person in as an external member to make them pickable. That said, we converted over something like 30 or 40,000 records. So basically anybody who's ever served on a committee from outside of UC Berkeley is already pickable, right? So even if someone is from another university, from another UC, if they've served before, likely they're going to be able to find them in that committee pop-up window. If not, we can add them. This is a little bit backwards in the sense that I would like this form to have everybody, to get all of those benefits that we talked about checking the form, we need to have everybody pickable. If we just have a text field saying, type in the name of the person you'd like to add, we're right back to where we started with just free entry. Does that make sense? There's another issue, which is that, and I wish I could show this to you, I'll try again in just one second. When you see the pop-up window for picking committee members, if you were to type in Fiona Doyle, you would actually see several different lines because she has several different appointments. She has her professorship appointment in material science, but she also has an appointment as a researcher in a different or same department. She's also a member of several different graduate groups. So it's important that the student select the appropriate row for their committee. So if it's a material science student, they should pick the material science row. If it's a student in a graduate group, they should pick the graduate group row. If you don't see a graduate group row, it's because she's not a member of that graduate group, and I think most administrators in the graduate groups know the process for adding those. You can contact me and we can put somebody in the system to sort of make them pickable, right? Might be the problem is that the Wi-Fi is down. Is that possible? Everything I talked about right here is also shown in those tutorial videos, right? So that would be sort of the first thing is to look through those videos. And it's aimed at students because students fill out this form, right? So I recognize that that's perhaps a pain point. We've already been there with some of the other forms, the special enrollment petition, which has in absentia and filing fee, but this is a big one. But there is no way for the department to fill out these forms for students, right? The student needs to initiate it through their CalCentral. So we have a number of different things. We have the job aids, which are just static PDF documents. We have the tutorial videos. And then also this afternoon, you will receive an email from me, which is sort of an explanation, a rehash of the things that I was talking about here in one section. And then in the bottom section, a lot of this information, again, written to the student. And the idea is that perhaps you can forward that message directly to your student. You don't have to rewrite it and understand everything. You could forward it directly to the students. It's a little bit tricky sort of automatically messaging students. If we were to message all graduate students about this form, there would be thousands of professional students that this doesn't apply to, that would get confused about trying to advance to candidacy for their business administration degree or something like that. Also, students that have already advanced, already ready to file, this is not particularly relevant to them either. So the thinking is, and you can tell me if this makes sense, we can stage an email that you can forward because you know most appropriately which students this would apply to. And you could send it to one cohort now that you know are about to apply for the QE or something like that, and then send it again later. And then one of the final ideas that I have for rollout is that we can, if you'd like, if this makes sense in your department, we could schedule a session with students. If you have a number of QEs, or we know that a lot of students advance to doctoral candidacy right before the beginning of the fall semester because they want to get the NRST reduction. It's a bit of a deadline. Your department could schedule a session, and my staff or I can come and sort of walk through students, and that would allow us to talk directly to the students who are about to use this form, and also use some data that's more appropriate and applicable to their specific department, whether they need to have 4 or 5 members on their QE, which types of things are normally typical with their department. That make sense? Okay, questions?
You said that those who are external to the university but have self-served in the past will be part of the list that right now in the system. So that means they have a blanket approval to serve, or should anyone who wants to use one of those exception as well?
Very good question. So Yao's question was, if there is someone who's external to the university, who's already served on a previous committee at some point, so they're pickable in the list, does that mean they have existing exception to serve on a committee? And the answer is no, right? That's really only about whether they're pickable in the list. So one of the things that the form is doing is checking academic senate status. Do they have an appointment anywhere that is an academic senate level appointment, a professor, associate professor, emeritus professor, things like that. And so those people would not, the same way that a lecturer or a researcher would not. And so they can still pick them on the committee, they can still submit the form. It will just need sort of extra levels of approval and exception. So there is a request an exception form template that all of you have been using for many, many years for non-Senate members to serve. That same form, all of those checkboxes that they've published in the last 3 years, that they hold an equivalent degree, all of those things, are now on this form. They would be right up here. So those are all now on this form that could be submitted along with, because that's one of the other things in the past with paper, is that we always needed to have that exception along with the application for candidacy or the application for the QE, but sometimes we would get it, we wouldn't have it, we have to go back to you. Now it can be submitted at the same time. And there's also, as on all of these forms, an area at the bottom for attachments, right? So any kind of memo or explanation can also include comments, sort of communicating. This is probably something that would be used by you as the GSAOs more than the students, although it's open to the students, to attach to it as it's moving forward in the approval process. And this form routes similarly to all of the other e-forms that are in the system, where it will route to one or more of the people that are identified for the department. And just like all of the other e-forms, if there are no exceptions, if it's a standard QE committee, then it doesn't actually require graduate division approval. It's automatically approved when you approve it, because the essential checks that we're doing are being done by the system. Questions, Maria?
So I have a few questions. Let's see. So one is the $90 fee that went with the application for candidacy, is that being waived now? Is that correct, or what's happening?
That is not correct. The question was about the $90 fee. And if you think the university is going to give up on money, then you're wrong. Right. So excellent question. So the $90 fee that used to be attached as a check to the candidacy application will now be assessed automatically to the student's Cal Central account once their candidacy has been approved. So that fee job is actually looking at the milestones, and once it sees doctoral candidacy milestone as completed, then it assesses them the fee. The question is coming up, what about NSF or departments that pay the candidacy fee on behalf of the student? There are a few departments like that. In the case of NSF, our fellowships people in the grad division will find a way to pay that to the student's record. And in the case of departments that pay the candidacy fee for your students, you will be able to pay that using the award entry. Maria.
My next question is, basically, so this is rolling out on Monday. Does that mean you're not accepting paper forms for that?
Question was, what about accepting paper forms? Another excellent question. It's almost like you're a plant, because you're hitting all of these points. It allows me to just, So the answer to the question is, we will accept paper forms until the beginning of the fall semester. So that's a good month or more, right? And you know, I recognize that's really important because number one, there's students who are probably already in progress of doing this, that already have tried running around getting signatures and all that stuff. And I recognize in other cases, you may just want to do the paper forms and not have to worry about this right now or something like that. That's totally fine. And we'll accept them, like I said, until the beginning of the fall semester. And then when the fall semester starts, if we receive QE applications, recons, applications for candidacy, we'll return them and say, hey, please direct the students to do that. That's not ideal because, of course, the student's gone through the work of filling out the form and then to tell them, oh, you need to now do it all over again, even though it's really only about 2 or 3 steps. So I would actually urge you to make the switch over as soon as possible. And furthermore, this is being turned on to students on Monday, so Monday morning at 9 a.m., some student's going to find that link and click on it. So it's a little bit out of your control in terms of who's going to do what. But the other thing I would just reiterate is that this form has a lot of advantages. So I would urge you to just start using this right away because in many cases it's quote unquote immediate approval. So who wants to ask the question about QE 3-week deadline? You did, okay. So the assumed question is, what about the 3 weeks before the qualifying exam deadline? And the answer is, yes, that's still the deadline. So please instruct your students, and our information will still say that they need to apply for the QE 3 weeks before the deadline. That said, let's be honest here, the form, they have to pick a proposed date. It doesn't limit them to 3 weeks ahead of time. They could pick a date for tomorrow. And furthermore, as I've already mentioned, when the form is submitted, if there are no issues, right, if the form checks the committee and it looks like it adheres to policy, it routes to the GSAO. In some cases, you might just be sitting right next to the student if they're doing it in your office with you. You can click approve, and it's approved. So for the moment, because we need to get rolling on this and you need a definite answer, the answer is they should apply 3 weeks ahead of time. And the reason for that answer right now is because you may not know whether or not it's going to go through automatically or if it's going to need that escalation level and route to grad div. And I really don't want to get into a situation where students think it's okay to just apply a couple days ahead of time, a week ahead of time, and then it actually does require more analysis and perhaps a little bit back and forth, and then the date comes and goes and a student takes an unapproved exam or anything like that. I think after we've been using this form in the wild for a semester or two, we could have a discussion. I think it's actually maybe more a question for you all about how you would like to market that deadline to students, and if you have a kind of department where most QEs are just standard and they don't have any exception, maybe we can make a change there and go a little bit more department by department. But for right now, the answer is 3 weeks. Okay. Yeah.
So I imagine it's pretty easy for a student to make a mistake if they see multiple lines on a faculty member's record.
Right.
Is there a way that a staff member who's looking at the form can make changes if they see something funky?
Yeah. So the question is there a way for a reviewer, a GSAO, to make changes to the form after it's been submitted? The answer is no. When the student submits the form, it routes to you. You review the form, but all of the information, all of the choices are ghosted out. You're not able to change them. And this is kind of just the way that almost all of these forms are set up, in the sense that the student is in control of their record, they initiate the form, and you're reviewing it. So technically, if they did something wrong and needed to change something, they would need to resubmit it. I think there is a link in Cal Central that will bring them to an area that will allow them to change something change one of their forms that's in progress. I'm not sure what the cutoff is there, though, if it's once it's been routed or if they start the form or if it's received an approval or two. One other point about picking people, because you're right, when they search for a committee member, they may see multiple rows, they may click on the wrong one. The one that they click on is the one that's shown in that table here. And so if they pick the MCB record, it'll show in the department as MCB. If this person also had a joint appointment in chemistry, they picked the chemistry line, it would show as chemistry here. So that's a problem because if you're looking at the form, or if we're looking at the form, we're going to be looking at, who's in the department and what their titles are. Same goes for titles if someone is a researcher and a professor. However, the good news is when the form does those checks in the background, it's looking at the professor's entire record. So if they pick the wrong version, it'll show wrong here, but the form will still say, yeah, this is a valid committee because this chair has a appointment in MCB, even though they picked the chemistry. Hope I didn't confuse things too much there. Basically what I'm saying is there's a difference between the validation of the form and what's displayed here.
So is that okay? We just let it go?
Yeah.
Or we send it back to them and say, you need to correct, choose this.
I would say that it's okay if it's, if you, presumably you know who these people are and you know, oh yeah, this is perfectly fine, and you would click okay.
And we'll be able to see that they've chosen chemistry instead of
You would see exactly what they chose on this screen. Of course, if it required additional routing to GradDiv, we may not have that intimate knowledge of each professor, and we would see, oh, it looks like the chair is not. So this is not ideal. This is one of the revisions. This is actually something that we kind of struggled with. I think you may remember in the last time I showed this, we had a problem where it was, because we were trying to actually guess which one should be shown there. No matter which one they pick, it would show certain things here, and it wasn't working properly. And just, in the interest of getting this out, getting it finished, we switched it to whichever one they pick will be shown. Okay? Oh, internet. Kay.
For those of us in the graduate groups or interdisciplinary programs, in the past we've been sending you these lists annually that say who is our core faculty, who is available, and who their core orients are. Do you still want those lists? How does that mesh with this system?
Yeah, the question was about grad groups and the core membership lists, and the answer is yes. I still need those lists, and when you send me those lists indicating new people that are added to the grad group or people that have been removed from the grad group, that's going to inform how it's displayed for students when they pick somebody. So if there's an ERG person who needs to be a core member to be able to serve as chair, but the student doesn't see an ERG record, then that would mean we would need to update the grad group. Okay, Shelley?
So in the past, somebody who had a 0% appointment in our department and full-time in a different department might be able to serve as an outside member. Is that still true with this system, or did that go away completely?
The question was about the 0% appointments, and nothing has been changed in the system in terms of the policy. And so that was actually sort of a clarification of policy that Dean Doyle checked with the Graduate Council on. There was a memo that was sent out clarifying that. That's still in effect. And so someone that has a 0% appointment in a department can serve as the ASR. The expectation is that they don't really have an affiliation with that department in a way that would preclude them from being objective. Yep.
How does this form incorporate the parts where like the head academic advisor or the chair traditionally put a wet signature?
Yeah, good question. So the question was about how does this form handle the signatures and the approvals from the chair or the head graduate advisor? And the answer is it doesn't. And so similar, and we've had this discussion a couple times now, but I'm happy to keep. Oh, of course, yeah. I only mean that this is the same thing as the other forms when we talked about this, which is that we are implying approval from the HGA with your approval. And so the way I've explained it before is that we were faced with the decision with these forms of all or nothing. Either every form, every submission would need to always route to the HGA, and let's say the chair of the dissertation committee and insert them into the process, or none. And so the none answer is, I think, the more efficient and streamlined one here. That means if you're in a department where your head graduate advisor wants to be able to review these before they're approved or anything like that, unfortunately that means you would need to probably do that manually, meaning you could print it out, you could show them, somehow adjust your process. If that seems to be the kind of case that's always happening and that's a huge issue for you, contact me. There may be some ways that we can work with the routing to sort of do ad hoc routing where you're able to reroute it on an individual basis. But the way that the form is set up is that it routes to the GSAO first and then grad div if necessary. And so the approvals are implicit. Deanna?
Thanks, Jared. My question is about GSAO access to these e-forms, because I've had a lot of frustration in reviewing e-forms that a student has submitted. I just figured out how to do that yesterday. But the link on the approval notice that comes to me has not been working to view the form, and I just figured out how to view it in my work center. By searching by the number. So my question is also about, will that link start to work so that I don't have to go back to a different menu to do this? That's question number one. And question number two, there is actually a place in our work center where you can update a student e-form, which, as far as I can tell, doesn't do anything. So I'm wondering about when we attach an exception memo. Where do we do that? Do we do it when the student is sitting down next to us and say, here, I'm sending you this form, this memo right now, take it and attach it as you go with your CV about that outside member? Can you clarify that a little bit?
Sure. So there are actually 3 questions. I'm taking them in reverse order. The third question was about when to attach an exception. And I think the answer to that would be when you're reviewing and approving the form. And so you can, yeah. So I said before that it was all ghosted out, but the comments and attachments section at the bottom is always available. Now, if you are in the situation where a student is sitting with you filling out the form, and you know it's going to need an exception, it wouldn't actually, if it's reviewed by the graduate division and by my office, we don't actually see, I don't think, where or at what stage the attachment was made. Comments are sort of attached to the user, but attachments are just listed on there. So whether it was attached by the student or the department doesn't particularly matter when it gets to grad div. Of course, the caveat is that, as with all exceptions, we don't really accept requests for exceptions from students, right? The requests need to come from the department, need to be supported by the department. So a student shouldn't attach some kind of exception here explaining why they want to do this or that. It really needs to be the department explaining why this is in the best academic interest of the student. Your second question, well, go back to the first question, which was about the link in the notification email. If that's not working, it's the first I've heard of it, so please let me know. Should be working. It's always, it'll require the SIS people to diagnose whether that's a security issue, whether it's just a bad link or malformed or something like that. So please, if you encounter things that used to work and then suddenly don't work, we absolutely need to, perhaps this is an issue with the upgrade or something like that wasn't tested.
It's not the link in the email. If you click on the link in the email, it takes you to the place in the work center where you're supposed to approve or not.
Right.
And then when you click on the little button that says view form, i.e. the form that they have submitted that you were supposed to be looking at, that does not work. You have to put in the form ID.
So there was some discussion about putting in the form ID, which is definitely part of it. Unfortunately, the notifications are a little bit all over the place. In the CPP, the change of major e-form, there isn't a link in the email. It's just a notification. In the filing fee in absentia parental leave form, there is a link. This one will have a link. Obviously, one of the priorities is to standardize all of those things. It's always a good idea, just because it's an easy way to find things, is to take note of the form ID, which is also listed in the email. And if you put that into the search thing, you should be able to pull up the form. I recognize that as far as workflow goes, and once this goes live, right, it's going to increase the workflow, or the workload of these e-forms, because in the past it was just students changing major or applying for filing fee. Now it's every student who wants to change their committee, apply for QE, all of these things. So that brings us to, I think, what was your second question, which was about the work center and the issues there. And I totally share your frustration in using that feature to find forms and to search for forms and to show status of forms. And that's actually one of the top priorities from GradDiv for the SIS office in terms of rethinking that, increasing the functionality there, perhaps providing different tools to be able to see a snapshot of all of your department's e-forms and filters for different types of e-forms and things like that. So on that particular issue of the workflow, I'll have to ask you to be patient. They recently just updated that Work Center, the View Forms feature, so that it now works with student ID, which of course is called EMPL ID, and also student name. So in the past, if you just tried to put in a student's name, it wouldn't find anybody, but now it should. So that would be a little bit of a help, but more on that later.
I have a question. The form, with the committee form from the ADD, I'm assuming the last line that is listed there, or shaded line, is to add a fourth member, right? Let's say a student was a fourth member, they're listed 3. There will be a capability to add a fourth if necessary.
Yeah, so the question was about adding a fourth member. This seems like a good time to give this another college try.
And my second question is, what will happen, or I imagine now that the approval
Right.
of the human subject is not included in the form.
Yeah, so the other question was about human subjects. So, I've really focused on the committee portion of the form because that's kind of the most tricky, I think, and it's also really the bread and butter of the form. However, each form, the QE application, has a section where they have to list their proposed subjects. The advancement to candidacy application has a section where they have to indicate human subjects, option 1, 2, or 3, vertebrate animals, things like that. So there's a little bit of variation between the forms, but that is on the form itself as well.
And that we will be the one approving the whole thing.
Correct. You'll be approving it, yeah. So looks like this is working. It's a Christmas miracle. And when a student clicks on that link, obviously they don't have to go through any of these menus or anything. It takes them directly to this page and where they choose which type of form they're going to fill out. So in this case, I'll pick advancement to candidacy. They have to pick a committee type because they could have a master's Plan 1 committee. They could also have a doctoral committee. Most students will just see the doctoral choice. And then here's some information. This is where it also indicates that the $90 will be charged to their account once it's approved. And then here is the form itself. And so you can see this section here. And I can demonstrate some of the committee selection in just one moment. But if we scroll down, you will see this section that we were just talking about for human and animal subjects. This is all just copied over from the paper form, basically. And they just have to choose option 1, 2, or 3. And depending on which option they choose, they may or may not need to upload documentation. Same kind of thing that they would attach to the form in the past. This is the section that I was referring to earlier, which takes the place of that non-academic Senate member exception template form, right? All of these check boxes should be familiar. And that's only required if there is a non-Senate member on the committee. Right? And so for this student, this is an MCB PhD student. I'm going to click on the magnifying glass to pick a chair. I'm going to wait and wait and wait. No, it'll be much faster in production.
the first day opening, where do they find it initially? Is it on their Cal Central?
Yes. So this link is on the Cal Central, and I can show that one more time. This description field has like a whole bunch of things concatenated together: the professor's name, their title, their department. So if a student knows the exact name of the person they're looking for, they could just type it here. Right? If they don't know the exact name, starting with the first name, they could switch it to contains. And they could also, I don't know why they would want to, but they could put contains and put molecular cell biology, which would show all the professors in molecular cell biology. I recognize that this kind of thing here is a little bit fiddly, and it's obviously not real user-friendly, but this is sort of how the system, I mean, you've seen this across other things in the system, right? So, can you say that again? So you can sort these columns. So if I just type in Brit as a first name, and you could put, first name, last name. If I did contains, you could just use the last name. This stage right now in this testing server is particularly slow because it has to go out to the HR database, HCM, and then pull in these records and things like that. This is the professor I was looking for. You can see there's actually 5 rows, like I was mentioning before. This professor is a member of both of these graduate groups, and then has an associate professor appointment in MCB, associate professor appointment in PMB, and then an associate agronomist appointment. So this is an MCB student. He or she should just pick that one. We've already discussed what happens if they don't pick the correct one. It'll still validate the form just fine. It knows that this chair is in MCB, but it wouldn't show on that line. So, okay. And so, another major annoyance is that the formatting is not very flexible with these e-forms, and so this table actually scrolls left and right, and I think on some systems or some browsers, it may not be obvious that it can be scrolled. So, that's highlighted strongly in the tutorial videos. Yeah, I will. Don't worry. So here's where it's showing the title, department. This is a column that's not actually a checkable box. These are ghosted out. That's displaying whether the person is a Senate member or not. And so if I had picked the agronomist row here, it would still show as Senate because this faculty member is an academic Senate member. And then over on the side here are the plus and minus buttons. And so if this is a dissertation committee, if they wanted an additional person or they wanted co-chairs, they could press the plus. It will eventually add another row, and where they can pick somebody and they can choose the appropriate role. So we tried to figure out almost all of the different things a student could do and have them reflected in those pop-up messages when they try to submit. So if they try to submit with a co-chair and a chair, it'll say, no, you have to have 2 co-chairs. If they tried to just have 1 co-chair, it would say you can't just have 1 co-chair. If they tried to have 2 ASRs, it would say you can't have 2 ASRs. So there's a lot of validation built in for a lot of those just real basic issues. Those are the kind of things that the student should go back and fix. And then furthermore, there are other things where it's checking the actual membership where the student may want to proceed with an exception. Yeah.
For future reporting purposes, will it be by name or employee ID? I'm guessing since people have the choices, right? So how do you envision reporting to them?
So the question was about reporting, and I think you mean reporting on committee service, like for faculty reviews and stuff like that. It would be, I think, basically the same as it was in the past, in the sense that until perfect tools are given to you to be able to do that yourself. I'm not sure entirely the integration with AP Bears yet, but Obviously, the graduate division is the office of record for these higher degree committees, and so we have this information. It's in the system. Reporting should be fairly simple. And you know, when I saw that list of 5 different people, they all had the same employee ID. It's the same person in the database, so it's not like you're going to get one list of all of their grad group committees, unless you wanted those kind of distinctions. Yeah.
For the non-academic senate piece, if they have blanket approval, are they still required to put in the attachment?
Excellent question. The question was about blanket approval for non-Senate members, existing blanket approval. If a professor already has blanket approval, if an adjunct or a clinical professor already has blanket approval to serve, unfortunately, it's not captured in the system yet. So this is just one of the missing pieces of functionality. So what will happen is the system will think, oh, this is a non-Senate member. It's not going to prevent the student from proceeding, but it is going to route and escalate it to grad div. If you know that they have blanket approval, I think if you put that in the comments or you indicate that somewhere, we can speed that along. But that is one of the fixes that we'll need for the future, is some way to track those blanket approvals and have it recognize that although somebody is not academic senate, they should be considered like that for this committee. So unfortunately, that's just that's a punt. Maria?
Will faculty appointment changes be reflected in live time on this? So if a percentage of, they're now in our department or whatever, will they show up on this immediately?
Will faculty changes be shown in live time? And the answer is yes. So every time anybody hits this magnifying glass, it's popping up that window and it's actually reaching out and pulling in information. So any changes in appointments should be reflected in real time, or as close to real time as is updated in HCM. That can cut both ways, right? If somebody is needing an appointment, but it hasn't been entered yet, then the system is going to think that it's not acceptable because it hasn't been approved yet. You know, it could still be, you could put that information in the comments. That's actually the same as right now. I mean, my staff does their best to check professorship against what we have now in GradLink for records, and if we see something that's different from what you see, usually we say, well, we need to be able to see that first, right? So that's an advantage of being able to see basically what we would see. So we're all working off of the same sort of appointment information. Okay, yep. One more time, please. Yes, so the question was, is it printable? It's not printable in the sense that there is a nicely formatted version that I know of. That might be easy or hard to request, I'm not sure. But you know, obviously you can print portions of it and things like that. I think that's a really good idea. It's one of those things that cuts both ways, where we're trying to dissuade paper, right? Everyone just printing out everything and keeping files. But on the other hand, especially if you need to run things by your HGA or things like that, it could be totally invaluable. So I'll put that on the list.
Will it show in the ASR as well?
Say again?
Once it's approved, will it show in there for the student's ASR?
What is the student's ASR?
APR, sorry.
Yeah, so the question is, well, the point is, when this is approved by the last approver in the row, whoever that is, whether it's the GSAO or the grad div representative, it will immediately approve the milestone, the committee, attach the committee to the milestone, which would then be viewable in Cal Central, in the committees page, milestone page, APR, everything else like that. Josh?
Will the report to graduate division on results of the qualifying exam remain paper for 2018?
Excellent question. It was, what about the QE results? That is still paper. So an e-form might be nice for that. It's a whole lot more complicated because we do need signatures, or at least individual approval from each member. That's not something where we can just necessarily wave it away and say, well, the GSAO approves it, it's fine. Not that you would approve it if it wasn't approved by or passed by all the members, but there are a fair amount of cases where QEs are disputed and it really comes down to who did what. So at the moment, you'll need to continue submitting those through degree scans in paper. Also, I figure it's easy to have a piece of paper that you can actually bring to the exam and have people sign on site, right? Eventually, we'll get you all iPads that you can do that with. And so, yeah.
So if you are exploring, possibility of this getting printed out, if the information within the application for the qualifying exam can result in that form with each professor listed, if you're exploring that, that might be another.
Yeah, great idea. So that was about if we are going to make a printable version of this, perhaps making it print formatted so that people could sign right on this or something like that. I think that's what you mean, yeah. It's a great idea. Yeah. Deanna?
So I'm wondering, one of my frustrations is that I can't actually see any of the student-initiated forms unless I grab a gig walking past my office and tell them to sign into Cal Central. Are your tutorials, do they have these entire forms sort of shown so I can go and look at it and see where students are probably going to hit a hiccup or whatever when they try to do it?
Yeah. So the question was about the tutorial videos and what they show. And they show step by step from the very beginning till the submission everything that they need to go through. This is hopefully a decent option or a replacement for giving you access somehow to dummy forms or something like that. We've really put our heads together in that and couldn't figure out a way to do that. Thought about maybe using OSCE Bear's record, but OSCE would need to be approved for the QE and approved for the dissertation and also be a master's student and all this stuff. So the other thing I would say is that if you want to just poke around in it a little bit more closely, give me a call. I can come over. I can log you into this testing environment, and we can go through it if you really want to get a refresher on it. It's not really feasible to give everybody in this room access to the test servers. Not that they would want to do that. So that's one other thing. Yeah, Kira? Yeah, so Kira's mentioning that, like I said, there will be the job aids, which are sort of static documents, but they have screenshots in them of each section and what's expected and things like that. Yep, that's okay.
I was looking at the form and trying to see, well, I don't think the student's going to go to look at a video of how to do this or spend too much time reading instructions. Usually you just go to the form and follow through. What is the purpose of the plus and minus by this test? Can you?
So the question was about the plus and minus, and that's to add or remove rows.
Yeah, or what would that mean?
It's unfortunate that it's underneath that status.
Right, it seems...
Yeah.
You have a plus and minus, under 3, for instance, that will say, okay, if I want to add, I press here and then I know we'll add it, but it's...
Yeah, I understand your point about it being a bit confusing. Unfortunately, like I said, we're really hamstrung by the eForms software's ability to handle these formatting things. I mean, I think I've mentioned about 1 billion times, like, it'd be nice if you could just grab on this little thing and slide it over here to make this. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately. And so, barring future enhancements where we can have some kind of nicer skin for this or sort of make it more pretty and more usable, we're stuck with it the way it is. I'm interested, once this goes live, to really get feedback on what students think about it and how they use it. I think probably you would agree that the reality is that some students will just figure it out and it'll be fine, and others will get here and be totally overwhelmed and will have no idea and will just want to ask somebody or something. Hopefully, by putting the instructional video and that link directly on, right next to the form itself, then maybe they'll hit that. I recognize that students probably don't want to sit through, and each one of these videos is like a couple minutes long, and yeah, but I think we're doing what we can. And also, that other point I made about scheduling a in-person sort of demonstration for your doctoral students, let's say. How many people, show of hands, think that might be a good idea, or you might want to do something like that? Okay, so basically one person. Yeah. Right, understood. We actually, we used to do this, my staff used to do this a fair amount in the past with like dissertation formatting and have those kind of sessions. And for students that were getting ready to file, that were worried about their formatting and all of the different steps and stuff like that. I'm not entirely sure why we stopped that. I mean, we didn't intentionally stop that, so that offer is still open. I think on the dissertation submission side of things, moving to an electronic process and PDFs and stuff makes it a lot lower stress for students, and if they make little problems, they can be fixed more easily, so it might be the same kind of thing here. Shelley?
In the instructions for the qualifying exam, it specifies a 4-member committee is minimum for quals and I think 3 people for advancement. Can you also put, please check with your department for minimums?
Yeah.
Because some of our committees are supposed to be 5.
Right. Yeah, so Shelley's point was about the instructions for the qualifying exam, and I believe it does say that right now, that if it's minimum is 4, but check with your department, some departments may require more. Yeah. Yeah. Yowo saw it, he knows. Anybody else? We have about 10 minutes left, so if anybody has any other questions, please let me know. Like I said, I will reiterate, this afternoon you'll get the email from me with 2 sections. One sort of going over some of this stuff again about the form, where it can be found, stuff like that. And then another section which hopefully you can forward on to students, students that you deem appropriate at whatever time you think is appropriate. And if anyone has any just suggestions for rollout, for something that we could do, or ideas for making this available to students. I'm kind of nervous about this, right? Because this is something that all doctoral students are going to have to do, unlike some of the other forms that we have, which are only applicable to certain students that are applying for filing fee or something like that. But all doctoral students are going to have to do this a couple times, at least once for the QE and once for the candidacy. And then if they want to change their committee, likewise, it would be done this way. Okay? Question was about the change of CPP, the change of major form is still GSAO initiated. Yeah, that's on the list of things to move to student initiated, which I know right now that's the same form is used by both grads and undergrads. So the reason that it's taking so long to make that change, or if it will ever be changed, I hope it will be, is because we have to get agreement from the undergrad advisors who also don't want it to be student initiated. Rosa.
Going back to the other student-initiated forms like filing fee and in absentia, are those approvals supposed to show up on the student's Cal Central? Because I've submitted some and it's been approved by, let's say, myself and their faculty advisor, but I still can't find it anywhere, the actual approval from Brad did.
Yeah, so the question was about the SEP e-form and where those approvals are shown. And at the moment, I don't think that they are shown anywhere in Cal Central. So when a student is approved for filing fee, their fees are adjusted, and it would show filing fee on their fee statement. Likewise for in absentia. The reports will show it. The reports that say yes for filing fee. I think that's maybe the comprehensive student report that would show that. There is a status card in Cal Central which says, if a student is registered, you are registered in 12 units, or you're not registered, or things like that. That's a great place to show their status of on filing fee or on in absentia. And so I think it's one of the proposed changes for that. So work in progress, but at the moment, yeah, there isn't any obvious way in Cal Central for a student or you to see that they are on that status without looking at their bill, for one thing.
Because I do remember that last year or last spring, sometimes that filing fee would show in the status, but then it would disappear. If you're just looking to check without having to run a full report if the student's...
So you remember I'm repeating what you said, you remember the filing fee perhaps being shown in that status. I'll have to look into that. I remember at one point it was showing in that status, and it was saying you are currently registered at blah, blah, blah. And when someone told me about that or I found that, I immediately said, no, we can't say that because it's not registration, right? We've been over this in a number of different ways. Can't pay them on filing fee, all of these things. And so the quick fix for that might have just been to take that out. So that might have been why it disappeared. I have to look into that because it's been a while since I've looked at that. But I think the long-term goal is to have that status card just show what their current status is. Yeah.
Quick routing question. With GSAOs, if this is any of these forms are being routed to a GSAO, in our case, we have someone that is being routed to from about 2 years ago, still being CC'd. But as time goes on, however SIS is developing this with you, hopefully this, shall we say, flexibility, because you'll have GSAOs that come and go and so forth, that area is concentrated on. Because again, it's going to someone who's left.
Yeah. So your point was about the routing and about who are the people that are listed there. And you're right. Over the semesters, we've had a lot of issues with the advisor assignments, not just with the routing of the e-forms, but also with that card in Cal Central, which says who is your GSAO, who is your head graduate advisor, things like that. We've made a lot of progress on that, and if you find things that are inaccurate, like someone who's already left, or someone who's changed departments, or extra people that need to be added in, email me directly, and we can solve it. Unfortunately, there is not an automated process at the moment for checking the payroll system to see who is, and GSAOs have a lot of different titles across the campus, and so it's a manual / automated process. Is Lisa still here? Lisa Chang? She might have left. Okay, but I was going to just introduce you to Lisa, who is someone in the SIS project who has been brought into this process, and her and I are working closely on getting these changes not just put into the system, but then pushed through, because there's actually a number of different tables and areas of the system that need to be updated. But at the moment, it's still pretty much you have to let me know if there's been a change. So hopefully, likewise, if there's any gaps, if there's just someone who's not listed who should be, or things like that. But thanks for bringing that up, Joel. Yeah. Maria?
So I don't know if anyone else has experienced this, but we've received a number of Accenture requests, and we've approved them. And we found that in some cases it routes to the chair, and the dissertation chair, and in some cases it does not. So I don't know if I need to maybe talk to you separately about that, but it's something that's sort of caused an issue because sometimes we don't know if it's going to the chair, so we can't alert them to, keep an eye out for that email. And I also don't know if all the ones that were approved without the chair's approval, if we need to go back and get their approval now.
Yeah. So the question was about in absentia applications that do require approval from the chair. And so that's the asterisk to everything I was talking about before about GSAOs having all the power. That's the one form where we do insist that it gets routed to the student's dissertation chair. I'd love to revisit that and maybe take that out. I recognize that that's in some cases a pain point. The reason that that's only that one form is because in absentia is a UC-wide program that came down from UCOP. We don't really have the authority to just change that. And one of the important parts of that as written was that it has to be approved by the dissertation chair to approve the research that they're doing in absentia. But the question was about sometimes it routing to the chair and sometimes it not. If things like that come up where it's not functioning the way that it should, contact me and we'll have to look into it because that is probably a bug or just missing data. It could be that the form doesn't know who the chair is, if it's not synced up, if it's an old committee that wasn't converted, things like that. But it really should be going to them every time. And one more point on the routing is that I have access to sort of an administration tool that allows me to pull up any e-form and reroute or approve or sort of supersede all of the routing things. So if something gets stuck or something gets routed to the wrong person or something was submitted but you can't find it, things like that, contact me, contact my staff, and we can sort of try to find it and dig into it. So that's, again, sort of like the fail-safe. But we're hoping to converge on a place where it gets routed appropriately and quickly, and in some departments where there are multiple people who provide backup and things like that, also set that up as well. Rosa?
Is the deadline still the same for in absentia and filing fee?
The question was about the deadline for in absentia and filing fee, and those deadlines are now the beginning of the semester. And maybe a week or two ago, I actually updated that on our deadlines page on the GradDiv website. Yeah. So it used to be that the deadline for in absentia for the fall was midsummer, right? July 15th. That's no longer the case.
And filing fee is also the beginning, not the end.
Filing fee is the beginning of the semester of which they want to go on filing fee. So any students that want to apply for filing,
after.
yeah, exactly. So that one has moved back a couple days. The in absentia has moved forward. In both cases, the deadline is coded into the form. So if a student submits a filing fee or in absentia application late, mid-semester, they can still submit the form. It'll still get routed to you. It'll be an exception, and we'll need to route to GradDiv. And additionally, we'll need to route to the Office of the Registrar. They're the ones that really want to see at the beginning of the semester the student status. And so if there is a decision or there's just a delay, it's not that it's not possible to approve those late, and we certainly can and will, but it'll just require a couple extra approvals.
Will you require a memo for that if they're starting in the middle of the semester or something?
The question was, will we require a memo for that? And the answer would be yes. So if they were trying to go on filing fee in the middle of the semester, you'd have to explain why they did not have to meet the same deadline as everybody else. If the semester starts on Tuesday and the form gets routed on Wednesday and it just goes through that escalation, I think probably not a memo required because that's a day or two. So those deadlines are converged on the first day of the term. The in absentia one is significantly later, which gives them more flexibility. The filing fee one is a little bit earlier. Okay?
This is a little bit off topic, but while we're on the topic of student status, do you have any idea when it might show on their CalCentral, whether they're international F1 or J1 students? And also when their residency, well, their residency approvals are now shown, but if they're international or not, and what their visa status is.
Yeah, the question was about showing visa status, international status on their CalCentral page in a card. I don't have an answer for you on that. I can tell you that Andrea Rex and I have both grumbled about the fact that it's very hard for us to see that status. And I'm not even sure that we can.
No, I cannot.
Right. So we've been writing to the international office saying, is this an international student? So yeah, that's not really something I control, but I'm with you there. And I think that would be a good thing to have on a card, a status card, something like that, maybe on the profile, something like that. Okay. Any other questions? It's now 11 o'clock. I'll stay here afterwards if you want to talk to me independently. And feel free to contact me if you want me to come over and give you a personalized demo, something like that.